what we are now witnessing is the emergence of peer competition. For instance, between an existing hegemon, which is the United States of America, and an emerging power, which is China. So the only country, the only literal, so to speak, which is not part of NATO is Russia. So it's a world with a number of uncertainties. As I said earlier, the space for us to have that kind of approach is much smaller compared to India. So they actually need younger workforce to come in. On the other hand, there's the ethno-nationalism, and then of course another problem of illegal migrations. Climate is something which is essential for us. I mean, no one else needs to come and tell us that. India believes that it does not really need Pakistan.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Timesglo podcast. Today we have with us Ejaz Haider Saab. Ejaz Haider Saab, how are you doing?
Thank you so much. I'm very well, thank you.
Thank you so much for your time, sir. Sir, let's discuss इंटरनेशनल रिलेशंस और उसमें पाकिस्तान को हम मेन फोकस करेंगे, पाकिस्तान की फॉरेन पॉलिसी को भी थोड़ा सा टच करने की कोशिश करेंगे. तो हाउ डू यू सी जो करंट पोलर मतलब कि वर्ल्ड जो है वो उसमें चेंजेस इस तरह से आ रही हैं कि अमेरिका चाइना इज़ गोइंग टूवर्ड्स मिडल ईस्ट, उसमें बहुत सारे उसके रिलेशन जो है ईरान के रिलेशन, अफगानिस्तान के रिलेशंस को उन्होंने जिस तरह से चेंज किया, तो वो उसके पाकिस्तान पे क्या इम्पैक्ट्स होंगे?
Again, you have to first look at it in a broader sense, right? So you have basically the world has moved away from irregular wars, which basically where the states were pitted against non-state actors. We saw that in Afghanistan, we saw that in Iraq, in a way, after the US invasion. We've seen that in Libya and Syria. So once that so it's not that that's just ended, it's there. It'll continue to simmer for some time to come. But what we are now witnessing is the emergence of peer competition. For instance, between an existing hegemon, which is the United States of America, and an emerging power, which is China. Then, of course, we also have the Russo-Ukraine war, so Russia is now trying to push back. And so there's an actual hot war going on. And we just saw 3 days ago, we had the NATO summit in Vilnius. You must have seen their communique. So there is now a very clear effort, both on the Euro-Atlantic side as well as in the Pacific side. On the Pacific side, to essentially encircle China, and on the Euro-Atlantic side, to essentially encircle Russia. So with Sweden and with Finland now NATO members, Russia is essentially, so the Baltic Sea is now actually a NATO lake. So the only country, the only literal, so to speak, which is not part of NATO is Russia. And so the entire ganging up is against Russia. So the point that I'm trying to make is that Pakistan is now existing in a world where you have increasing bloc politics, which also means the near demise of the neoliberal trading order. And instead of that, the emergence of geoeconomics, where you use economics in the service of geopolitics. And so you will have multilateral trading arrangements, but also a lot of coercion in terms of sanctions. We've seen the weaponization constantly of the dollar. There is also a lot of conversation with reference to how to de-weaponize the dollar and Russia is now trading in you have these currency swaps
Yeah.
moving away from trading in dollars. Then we just emerged from a pandemic, and there is a likelihood that there will be more pandemics. And of course, there is the gray rhino event of the climate. Climate, I think we basically lost that race for all practical purposes. So there are multiple things happening. And you can add to that mix the emerging technologies, including artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
And not just artificial narrow intelligence, but artificial general intelligence. So it's a world with a number of uncertainties, a number of dangers, a number of challenges, and I'm not so sure if I find too many opportunities in this world. Pakistan, to answer your question with reference to Pakistan specifically, we are not prepared for these external shocks because we are internally very weak. We do not have a stable political system. We have an economy that is teetering on the brink, as you know. We have not really invested in education. We haven't invested in health. So without political stability, without having the human resource base, which is essentially linked with healthy, educated populations, we're not really in a position to have any meaningful impact, either within the region or extra-regionally. And so we are not active movers, if you will, or movers and shakers. We are not. We have to, unfortunately, given our various constraints, we have to react. And the only way for us to be proactive is for us to actually address the weaknesses that I just mentioned. But I doubt, and one can have another program on that, I doubt very much for several reasons that we'll be able to address those.
So my next question would be कि if we are on already our economy is tanking, like we are on loans, तो वो loans का हमारे ऊपर क्या impact है कि हम इससे भी ले रहे हैं, IMF से भी ले रहे हैं और बहुत सारे countries फिर ले रहे हैं. तो not in terms of foreign policy, or terms of internal जो हमारी security है.
Again, economy is not in my wheelhouse. I'm not an economist, but it's not just about loans or debt. It's about whether you can generate revenue, right? So in simple terms, if you're earning 10 rupees and you're spending 20, then obviously you are in a shaky position, And so that needs to be reversed. And that does have an impact on your foreign policy, because if you are constantly looking for handouts, then the space for an independent foreign policy obviously is very limited.
Yeah, that shrinks.
Yeah, that shrinks. That's a no-brainer.
Yeah. Sir, if we take a look के जो recent हमारे relations हैं with China, Russia, और हम ये भी अब बात हो रही है कि we are buying Russian oil. तो अगर हमारी close collaboration होती है with these countries, तो क्या हमारी situation बेहतर हो सकती है?
Again, we have constantly said that we don't want camp politics, right? And it makes sense.
Yeah.
It makes sense because we have our largest trading partner is the United States, followed by the European Union, right? But we also have a strategic partnership with China. China is the biggest investor in Pakistan. in and through CPEC. With Russia, we're getting the oil, which is fine. The many other countries that are also getting oil from Russia. And it makes sense that if we can get it cheaper, it kind of addresses our energy insecurity. So and at the same time, we also have very good relations with Ukraine. I think that it shows the degree of complexity in interstate relations. A number of, for instance, the US-led Western coalition would want every other state in the world to side with them and to completely, in theory, to completely isolate Russia. But that has not happened, right?
Yeah.
India, which is a partner, which is a Quad partner, India, which has a strategic partnership with the United States, is not prepared to. It has a legacy. There are these legacy relations with the former Soviet Union and later the Russian Federation, and they don't want to just dilute those relations simply because the US says so. And I think the Indians have made that very clear. And I think there's merit in that approach. And we have adopted more or less the same approach. Although, as I said earlier, the space for us to have that kind of approach is much smaller compared to India. And my worry is that if we do not address certain certain issues that we just talked about in terms of political stability, economic solvency, investing in human resource, then this space will further shrink. Then at that point, we might be forced into one or the other camp. And so to avoid that, we have to work internally in order to create some kind of robust system whereby the space for us to address the complexities of interstate relations increases rather than decreases.
Sir, why is Ukraine war being prolonged, or has the Russian aims वो fulfilled हो चुके हैं, या वो और मतलब कि they would like to prolong it?
No, the Ukrainians have shown a lot of resolve. Great.
Yeah.
No one was expecting it. As a matter of fact, when the invasion came, the main effort was from Belarus towards Kyiv, which is the capital. And the Russian aim was very simple, to capture Kyiv and install a puppet government, or a friendly government, if you will, and then negotiate with the West. But they failed to do that for various reasons, and for reasons of not understanding the requirements of logistics, miscalculating the resolve and capacity of the Ukrainian nation and the military to push back. So they had to withdraw from there and then focus on the south and east. And the Ukrainians have fought there very bravely. And as we speak, both sides are more or less exhausted in many ways. Although the Russians, in terms of numbers, if not quality, in terms of numbers, quantity, still have an edge over the Ukrainians. But the Ukrainians have dug in. So obviously, and they're not prepared to accept that the Russians have given them a fait accompli, that the areas that the Russians have captured are now Russian territory. They don't agree with that. There have been a number of proposals with reference to ceasefire, which essentially, the only way a ceasefire can happen is for the Ukrainians to accept that the Russians will stay where they are, which they are not prepared to do. And the Russians obviously know that the Ukrainians right now, in terms of sustainment of offensive operations, are not in a position to push them back. No, they're trying. There is a Ukrainian offensive going on as we speak, but it's very clear that it's going much more slowly than was anticipated. So there's a stalemate of sorts, which is prolonging the war.
Sir, if we take a look at the immigration, your European Union and Britain, immigration is trying their best to stop immigration. So, how do you see कि वो would they be successful और क्या way out है कि इस immigration को रोका जा सके?
Again, there's a dilemma there. Many European countries have aging populations. Italy, for instance, Germany, France to a large extent, many others also. And so they actually need younger workforce to come in, both unskilled as well as skilled. There are, for instance, Germany now has a policy, and Finland and many other countries have this policy of bringing people in. So that's one aspect of it. The other is, of course, people illegally going from here, from countries that are either war ravaged or where the economies are tanking and they want better prospects in life. And every third or fourth day, we hear of a tragedy of boats capsizing in the Mediterranean and elsewhere because illegal migrants are trying to reach Europe. So that's a problem. You might recall that after the Syrian civil war, when there was an exodus of Syrians that came to Turkey, Erdogan used that as a lever to say to the European Union that if you do not give me X amount of money, I will not be able to sustain these refugees, and they will then go through Turkey and into Europe. And so the European Union actually shelled out that money. That was, as far as Turkey is concerned, that was a smart move. Yeah. So multiple things are happening. And on top of that, even with reference to legitimate workforce coming into European countries, there is in many countries a lot of pushback because you have the far right parties which are ethno-nationalists, and they don't want the immigrants. We have just seen these riots in France, and those riots there are a number of reasons for those. But the far right parties latch on to this. And so there is a very dispiriting cycle of action-reaction, So the third or fourth generation non-white French, for instance, have their grievances. They do certain things, then the state reacts, and that reaction then begets another reaction, so it becomes like a vicious cycle. So on the one hand, they need the workforce from other countries, younger people, skilled and unskilled. On the other hand, there's the ethno-nationalism, and then of course another problem of illegal migrations. So it's a pretty complex issue.
Would Turkey be part of EU? Yeah, EU मतलब European countries let Turkey become part of EU?
Well, I mean, see, there was before the 2016 coup attempt, Turkey's application was there. I mean, Turkey has been part of that process for a very long time. But the EU has certain benchmarks. And so every country that is to become part of the European Union has to check those boxes. And in terms of human rights, in terms of judicial reforms, in terms of civil-military relations, in terms of freedoms of expression and other freedoms, human rights, and blah, 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 the number of things that you have to do. I mean, look at it like this. So we got the Generalized System of Preferences Plus in 2014, which is GSP Plus. And so we had to sign off on a number of benchmarks, in terms of sustainable development and good governance. And there is a review for the next 10 years, starting in 2024. And so they look at it, they see, and in a way they also understand that there will be progress on certain things, there will be lesser progress on certain other things because of various reasons, societal pressures, culture, and a number of other reasons. So it's not like they're saying, okay, unless you do everything right now, you're not going to get this. But there is incremental pressure, there are expectations that, okay, if we are giving you this facility, then you need to do certain things. My argument has always been that, we should do things on our own. I mean, many of these benchmarks are benchmarks that we should be meeting on our own. For instance, sustainable development or any actions or legislation or actual policy with reference to climate is something which is essential for us. I mean, no one else needs to come and tell us that. We have had these floods, we know how we've been impacted by this, and I think in many ways the government of Pakistan has done good work with reference to funding for the affected states, and so on and so forth. So to put it briefly, I mean, one doesn't need to actually wait for someone else to bring certain benchmarks to us.
So does Afghanistan has become irrelevant to the world?
Well, Afghanistan is largely irrelevant now, with the exception of its being a counterterrorism problem, right? The earlier US idea of societal re-engineering or sort of creating a different kind of Afghanistan, obviously that was done even during Obama's administration, when he said that, we're not bringing Jeffersonian democracy to Afghanistan. So those things are gone. There is a lot of lip service to women's rights and human rights, but the world knows that that's not going to happen. Within the Taliban, there are factions, there are hardliners, there are others who are pragmatists, and those who are the pragmatists, they want things to happen in a way that there's some kind of recognition of their government's legitimacy. I mean, they are the de facto government, but they're not de jure as yet. But the hardliners are sticking to their guns. And for us, it's a problem. It's a huge problem because in terms of our access to Central Asian markets, in terms of our, import of energy, including electricity from the cars, obviously we need stability in Afghanistan. So yeah, it's a bigger problem for us than it is for the world.
Do you see any developments on relations between India and Pakistan?
Right now it's difficult because the Indian policy is now fairly clear. They are quite confident that they're playing in the big league. Their economy is the growth is progressing. They have, to a very large degree, I mean, it is an illiberal democracy in many ways, but at least, so when it comes to the substance, one can criticize it in many ways. But at least in terms of the form and the constitutional spirit of it, it's there. So to that extent, it's stable. So political stability, economic progress, huge market, and people are getting prosperous. Not everyone, but the middle class is expanding. The purchasing power is increasing, and that obviously interests the world. And because of that, India believes that it does not really need Pakistan. I mean, in the sense that, in theory, they would want good relations with Pakistan, but with a Pakistan that is like a Canada to the United States or a Mexico to the United States, not really a country that can stand up to them, right? So they believe, and I think they've made it fairly clear, that, we'll wait for the time when Pakistan comes to us and says, look, we are going to sign on the dotted line. And that's the time when we can normalize with Pakistan.
We can see any development.
Yeah, so essentially, I mean, they're saying, look, we know you guys are not going anywhere. We are going places. And so we'll wait. Time is on our side. And unless some black swan event happens, I think the trajectories are very clear. And so that's that.
Sir, if we see in terms of water, Indus Water Treaty we have, so usme we can see that if there is any crisis emerges due to climate change, so we have to revise that Indus Water Treaty, or we have to come close at certain level.
Well, the IWT is already very precariously balanced. As you know, India basically wants to get out of the treaty. It's trying to do everything to get out of the treaty. So any suggestion that we need to renegotiate it or open the text of the existing treaty is not going to work to the advantage of Pakistan. I mean, this issue is not in my wheelhouse. I don't have any expertise here. But there are people who have worked on this very diligently. I mean, I can name Faisal Naqvi, who is an eminent lawyer, also a very dear friend, who was part of the team that fought the Baglehar case. He has also been suggesting what Pakistan's approach should be in terms of arbitration or the neutral expert. And there are lots of technicalities involved in this. But broadly, I think, and basically listening to him, and I believe he has a very solid argument there, that we need to try to do everything to ensure that this treaty stays the way it is. And so the corollary of that is that if you allow this, or if you say that you renegotiate it, or you have an additional protocol attached to this, or in any way to open the text of the treaty, that's not going to work to Pakistan's advantage.
This last question. Saudi Arabia is moving closer to Israel. Do you see any relations happening like between Pakistan and Israel?
I don't think so. There's just recent statement from the US which said that Saudi-Israeli relations, there's no real movement on Riyadh recognizing Israel.
There are no developments.
They have made it very clear that unless the Palestinian problem is resolved, the two-state solution, that's our approach also. We've always said that, the two-state solution is what is going to be the solution for this problem. And unless that happens, we don't have the space to recognize Israel. And the Saudis have also made it clear that they're not going to. I mean, there was a lot of talk that there was also a report a couple of years ago about a secret meeting in Sharm el-Sheikh, but the Saudis denied that. So that's that. I don't think unless something else happens, which I'm not aware of, I think it'll be status quo.
Thank you, sir, for your time. It was
Thank you
wonderful
for
having you
inviting.
on our show.
Thank you for inviting.